Hello, cupcakes. Did you know that some people, some English people, don't drink tea? They don't drink tea, they just prefer coffee. I'm a stereotype. We're not all tea lovers. It's ridiculous. I can't imagine why. Okay, so I'm on to part two of the tarot Q&A. I'm going to try and make it a little bit less rambly this time, but I can't promise anything because I do go on and I don't use any editing software. I am planning on starting to use editing software so I can make the videos maybe a little bit easier to digest for people with a normal attention span who don't want to sit through 29-30 minutes of me rambling. But for the moment, I don't use any software, so I do sort of go off on a tangent, and that tangent just kind of has to be left in the video, whether I ultimately think it's useful or not. So I'm going to try and make it as like the least rambly that I possibly can for you. Okay, question one. What is the difference between judgment and death? Okay, death normally pertains to a loss or change or metamorphosis of some kind, which tends to be unexpected or tends to err on the side of chaos. It tends to be something that kind of blindsides us on a wet Wednesday afternoon when we're not expecting it and we really have to adjust to it. So, death is often about the dangers of inflexibility, and it's about encouraging us to be yielding to whatever it is that's changed or to make way for whatever it is that's coming into our life unexpectedly. Whereas judgment tends to be more about a conscious metamorphosis or a conscious or desired transformation, which is often just as difficult and can feel often like a loss in the same way as death, but judgment is often about that self actualization that we bring into being. So it's a conscious transformation, it's something that we actually push towards, and it's something that we invite into our lives. It's still difficult, it's still overwhelming, and it's still a game changer, but it's not as unpredictable as death, and it's not always as undesired as death. It's something that we kind of know that we need to introduce into our lives, or it's a mourning that we know needs to take place. So that's kind of the key difference between judgment and death. Question two. Is the Three of Swords a symbol of heartbreak? Yes, it is a symbol of heartbreak. That would be a traditional way of reading it. But the thing to remember about the suit of swords is that the suit of swords is about communication. It's often about language, it's about words, it's about debate, it's about being able to communicate your authentic truth. So it's about the human voice a lot of the time, it's about language. So when you're looking at the Three of Swords, and it kind of often in the illustration, no matter what deck you have, the Three of Swords is going to look like a symbol, a traditional symbol of heartbreak. You can think of it in terms of what the suit of swords overall tends to represent, and the suit of swords is really often about words and language and how we can use communication to smooth the pathway forwards and to get people collaborating and to get the dynamics working and to enable you to be as authentic as you possibly can. So I often like to read the Three of Swords as a heartbreak which is on the horizon, or something which is at risk of breaking down, but needn't actually break down if you put authentic communication into play, if you actually start talking, if you pick up the phone to each other, if you change the dynamic up so that everybody has their turn with the talkie stick, if you like, and through doing that we can all be as honest and authentic as possible about what's really going on in our hearts and in our minds, and that normally enables us to move forward with kind of a renewed sense of love and compassion and harmony with each other, so that heartbreak doesn't really have to be the way the story ends. So a lot of the time when I get the Three of Swords in a reading, it quite often pertains to a client who might need to open up, who might need to get in touch with their throat chakra, who might need to get things moving in that way. And dependent upon the position, obviously, if the position represents maybe the past or the position represents the future, it can kind of represent times in the past where maybe authenticity wasn't a possibility, or if it represents the future, it represents a time when all of the feelings need to come out and need to be communicated, and there needs to be that clear channel between people. So yeah, I often feel that really, when all said and done, the Three of Swords is about communication. Three, what does it mean when Major Arcana cards are missing from a spread? That's a very good question. Well, I read Major Arcana cards as being representative of the fifth element, spirit. So you've got earth, air, fire, and water are the four suits, and then the Major Arcana tends to pertain to spirit, the fifth element. So, which obviously runs through each of the four. So for me, if I'm doing a full length reading, which comprises of normally between 12 and 15 cards, if I see that there are 4 or more Major Arcana cards, I tend to feel that that represents a very transitory and significant time for the inner life of the client. It normally, more often than not, means that the client is going through some major inner shift, which is really a bit of a game-changing time where they're starting to really self-actualize, or they're starting to really understand what their needs are, what their desires are, what they require from their own future. So it's really a time when they are kind of breaking out of the chrysalis and getting their wings in some way. That's what it tends to mean, although each spread has such an individual energy, and there will be certain things, certain symbols or certain collections of cards in the spread that I feel really give me the overarching feeling of what a spread is all about. So I read the energy very intuitively, but more often than not, if there are lots of Major Arcana cards, it's normally because it's a very transitory time in the client's life, and it's kind of very important. It's an important time in terms of how they decide to go forward. So it has a game-changing energy to it, and it's also about personal and spiritual evolution. So it's about inner evolution rather than outer evolution a lot of the time. And of course, those things marry up so completely sometimes that it's difficult to tell the difference, because when you change incredibly inside, the outer world tends to change to reflect that. So if there is if Major Arcana cards are completely omitted from the spread, if there are none whatsoever, in a 12 to 15 card spread, that would be unusual. But I would probably take it perhaps as a sign of stagnation, or as a sign of a refusal to accept the next stage of a spiritual evolution or a evolution of personal development. I might see it as a time when the client is focused more on what's going on in the outer world and paying very little attention to their own feelings and to their own intuitive instincts. But of course, it would be dependent upon the other cards in the spread, and it would be dependent upon the energy I'm getting from the client. So there are those things to consider. But yeah, I do often have a look at the cards that are omitted, and in my trainee tarot course, I do remind everybody in the I think it was the Deepening Understanding video, I do remind everybody that's watching the course that it is very important to think about the cards that are omitted as well as the cards that are present. So if you have an overwhelming amount of pentacles, for example, and then you have like a couple of cards from wands and a couple of cards from cups, but you notice that you don't have any presence at all from the suit of swords, then that can be just as interesting. Taking a look at what's omitted from the spread can be just as interesting. So there are a few ways that I would read a complete lack of Major Arcana cards. I would say that it could be about inner stagnation, it could be about fear of seeing what's really going on within. Or it could be a time when there's just very little movement going on, when there just seems to be, both in the inner and in the outer world, a kind of stuck in a traffic jam kind of feeling. So maybe there's frustration, maybe the client is looking to make a significant move one way or the other, but the advice is to delay or to hold off making that decision. Maybe there hasn't been enough inner change to warrant any final decision being made in the outer world. But as I said, the other cards will all play a part, so it would be very difficult for me to give a definitive answer because every spread is so completely different. Question 4. How can I find out for sure if someone is attracted to me using tarot? Well, I would personally give kind of an awkward answer to this question. I don't think that tarot is best used to take a look into other people's intentions and other people's feelings. Because really, even if you feel that a tarot reading has definitively told you that this person is attracted to you and this person wants to be with you, what do you do with that information? You know, how is that information helpful for you in terms of how you want to go forward and in terms of how you want to progress things in the connection? Really, what you should be doing when you use tarot is you should be making it into a person-centered practice as much as possible, because we can spend a lot of time focusing on other people and what other people's intentions are and how other people feel and what other people are or are not likely to do, but that doesn't really help us to forward with the best of intentions for us and to help us connect with what would be the right decision for us to make. So I wouldn't recommend that tarot is best used to answer that kind of question. That's my personal perception. In terms of what you can do practically to take a look into whether or not somebody might be attracted to you, if that's what you wanted to do, I would first of all take a look for a spread that really works for you, that has the kinds of positions that would work for you, that would be convenient. You want to look at what each card means in terms of what kind of, what it would tell you, kind of thing. So say, for example, if you want to do a 10 card spread to determine whether or not somebody was attracted to you, you'd have to look at each of those 10 positions in that spread and decide whether or not they actually would help you to further your exploration of this other person's psyche. So maybe try and customize a spread and ask all of the individual questions that you want to ask of tarot in each of these 10 positions, so that you end up with a very workable, very accessible spread where there's kind of like, it's all killer, no filler, if you see what I mean. So there are no cards there that kind of don't pertain to the question you're asking. For example, don't bother with the Celtic Cross, because the Celtic Cross is going to have a lot of cards that aren't really relevant. Like there's a position for domestic life and stuff like that. There's a position for family matters. You don't want that. You want to customize a spread which is very useful for the question that you're asking, so that you can get some meat off the bone with every single card. And the other thing that I would advise is that quite often your intuition is already telling you the answer when it comes to somebody else's motivations or feelings or intentions. If you really dig deep and you get to grips with your intuitive instincts when you're around that person, the kind of energies that you read from that person, a lot of the time you don't really need to use tarot to find out whether or not somebody's attracted to you or to discover what their deeper intentions or feelings are. It's something that your intuition is telling you. And sometimes when you find yourself asking tarot something that can be quickly and simply cleared up through the use of your intuition, it's often perhaps because you don't want to hear the answer that your intuition is already giving to you. It's kind of like you might be using tarot to create some kind of a false friend where you can convince yourself into an answer that isn't really what your intuition's already telling you. So I would recommend, intuition is your friend, and listen to intuition first and foremost. But really the overriding advice here is that tarot is a person-centered practice. That's how it works best. So I always recommend with my clients that we focus as much as possible on the self, we focus as much as possible on what the client can do proactively to get things moving in the way the client wants them to get moving, rather than focusing too much on somebody whom the client can't control, the client ultimately doesn't have any jurisdiction over. The only person you have jurisdiction over is yourself, so I would recommend that tarot be used primarily to focus on the self. Question 5. How do you string the cards together to make a story? I presume what this question is kind of leaning towards is basically asking me, how do you make a reading flow when a client sat in front of you and you've got the cards laying out? How do you actually make it flow? How do you make it tie in together? The first thing I'd suggest is that a lot of people begin with using positions in spreads rather than reading free form, and a lot of people begin the other way around, depending on which way is more comfortable for you at first. Some people find it difficult to remember the positions when they've got the cards laying out. Some people find that if they use positions, the spread doesn't really seem to flow, the words don't seem to flow when you're doing the reading. Whereas other people find that free form is difficult because they don't really know where to start, they might get nervous, they prefer to have kind of the structure of a set spread with positions. So what I would suggest is try out both. Try out free form, practice free form, and also practice spreads with positions as well, and see which one enables you to flow in a better way. See which one enables you to be more kind of fluid and less stuck. For me, I feel that I 9 times out of 10 will always use a spread with positions. Now quite often it will be a spread that I've customised to the client's requirements so that every card can be as useful as possible and so that I have a structure to understand the narrative of the reading. And I feel that when I'm face to face with a client, spreads with positions do work extremely well. You don't need to start with position 1 and then go on to position 2. You can actually just turn all of the cards over and decide which card has the most significant message or which card draws your eye to it immediately. As long as you've got in your mind or on a piece of paper next to you what each of the card positions is, then it's perfectly fine for you to go out of sync and to choose which card you want to start speaking about first. And I think most proficient readers do that. They kind of break from the rigidity of going for card 1 and then card 2 and then position 3. Really, we just take a look at whatever catches our eye first and we go into that and we read that according to its set position. I think practice is really important when it comes to making a story flow, when it comes to making the reading flow. You need to practice with your pace, you need to practice with the words that you're using, get as comfortable as possible with talking about each card. Don't try and rush things, don't try and go too quickly, don't panic yourself, don't fall over your words, you know. I think it's important to practice in front of a mirror, alone, speaking out loud, to get a sense of how you come across to a client and how you best tie a story together, and you'll find your own different ways of doing it. The other thing I wanted to say about this question is that it's quite possible that the person that asked this question may have been talking about bardic technique, which is storytelling technique with tarot. If so, that's a different thing. With bardic technique, you can just do 3 cards, beginning, middle, and end, and start the story like that. So, you know, a perfect card for the beginning, if you turned it over and it was the Fool, it would be like a guy with some belongings on his back and he's going off on a journey, and then follow it through like that. Question 6, how do you decide what to charge when you start reading professionally? Okay, the way that I did it, when I changed all of the prices and regulated all of the prices on my shop, the way that I did it was to decide what to charge per 1,000 words, because my general reading is 2,000 words plus. So it's between 2,000 and 3,000 for a general reading. So I decided that £8.50 for 1,000 words was fair. It was below a tenner, so it was still cheap and cheerful in terms of what's on the market in the internet tarot reading world at the moment. Still really kind of on the low end of the spectrum, which is where I wanted to keep it because I wanted to be affordable. So I decided £8.50 for 1,000 words, which makes it £17 for a full length reading. And then you've really got to break it down like that. That's how I did it. If I'm doing email coaching, I will decide that it's about £5 per email with exercises and stuff that I write in there. If you're selling Skype consultations and then maybe you send a Word document or a PDF document afterwards, you've got to decide how much for a 1 hour Skype session, how much for a 90-minute Skype session, and how much for the follow-up document afterwards. How long will it take you to write? How in-depth will it be? How many words will it be? And how much money do you expect per 500 words or per 1,000 words? And as you're working all of this stuff out and you're deciding what's a fair price and what would be a fair energy exchange, make sure that you write down, make sure that you make a note of what you've decided for the 1,000 word mark, what you've decided for the Skype consultation, that kind of thing, and keep tally of it, so that when you come out with new products and you decide to sell new things, you can work out how much everything will be when it's kind of tied together. So if you're thinking of doing packages or anything like that. The other thing to note is that a lot of people do tend to up their prices once they've done things like become a published author, for example. If they've written a book about tarot, then they might feel that people should be paying extra for the degree of expertise that can be proven from that reader, for example. Or maybe if they're a very prestigious reader and they've been going for a long time, maybe they sell products online, maybe they're on a TV programme, something like that, then they will normally charge more for the prestige aspect of things as well. So, you know, it's a broad spectrum and you've got to decide where you fit on that spectrum. You've got to decide how affordable you want to be, but at the same time, you've got to make sure that you're not cheating yourself. Question 7, how do you prevent burnout? I prevent burnout through making sure that I understand when my limit has been reached, and I understand when a lot of other stuff is going on in my life, to the point where I might need to turn my shop off for a little while and just relax and have a break, which is actually what I'm doing at the moment. Things are really coming to a head with my chronic pain. I'm getting an appointment with a surgeon and we're going to talk through my options. So there's a lot of things going on in my life at the moment which mean that I can't take on so much regular work at the minute. Because I've just got so much else going on in my life that really requires my attention. So I think it's really important to have a good relationship with yourself, to check in with yourself and to understand when you've got so much on your plate that you can't actually be available to your clientele in the way that you would wish to be. And I always wish to be available to mine 100%. When I'm working on their reading, that's what I'm doing. I don't want to have anything else in my mind at all. Other things to prevent burnout, meditation is a good one. I think having a good amount of time between readings is a really good one. A lot of the time, if you're a conveyor belt reader and you're doing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 readings a day, one after another, with no adequate space in between to relax or to kind of cleanse your mind and to become a clear channel for the next client, I think that can be problematic. And that's why I ended up instigating my 7-day turnaround, because I really feel that I put so much emotionally and intuitively into each reading that I do, that when I had a 2-day turnaround, I was doing 3 readings one after another. And at 2,000 words minimum each, that was really draining me. And I felt that if it was draining me, then it wasn't going to be a good enough use of the client's end of things, the client's money, the client's energy, the client's trust in me. I didn't feel that it was doing my skills justice, and I didn't feel that it was fair on the client. So I have a longer turnaround now. So really it's just about checking in with yourself and deciding what it is that you need for yourself. The other thing I'm going to say about burnout is that I notice that a lot of readers that are new to the scene, when they first come along into the online world and they don't have a clientele yet, they tend to do readings for free. They set up a Facebook page and they do readings for free, or they offer email readings for free in exchange for testimonials or feedback. This is a very good idea from a business perspective, but it's really important that you recognise where your limitations are with that. When I first came into the online scene in 2011, I offered Facebook one card readings for free, and I just wanted really to test the water, to see how I felt about doing distance tarot readings, to see if it was something that I did want to get into. I didn't want to open a shop and kind of throw myself in at the deep end with that, because I'd only ever done face to face. So I wanted to make sure that the online thing was a market that I wanted to tap into, and it was something that I felt comfortable with. So doing free readings on Facebook was kind of my introduction to the online side of things. And it was great, but I really didn't set my limitation and I got burned out quite quickly. And when you're doing free readings or you're giving readings for feedback or testimonials, you have to be aware of a few things. Like one, you're not always going to get a feedback or testimonial, even if it's what's been requested. So even if it was the understanding that somebody would give you feedback or testimonial in exchange for a reading, they're quite likely to not give you a testimonial. A lot of people just kind of don't return to you, they don't say thank you, they don't let you know how it went. So you have to be prepared for that, and you have to ensure that you're not putting in so much energy that you're going to feel a sense of resentment and exhaustion if you don't get the same amount in return that you were expecting from those people who get really free energy from you. And it's just important to make sure that you don't bite off more than you can chew. If you tell people that you're going to do free readings for them, then you've got to do those free readings for them. Okay, if you've set that premise and you've told people that's what you're going to do, then it's important that you do that, and it's important that you follow through with it, because you're the one that's going to feel bad about it if you don't. If you put your word forward and then you don't follow up with it, you're the one that's going to feel crappy about that. So if you do bite off more than you can chew, and you are in the middle of more than you can handle, it's okay to just email people or apologise to people and say, I'm sorry, I need to step back, this is too much. So I think it's just important to know your limits and to check in with yourself. Be really honest with yourself. If you're exhausted, you're exhausted, and you need to step back and kind of change what you're doing. Question 7. Oh no, question 8. How do you fit tarot into magical workings? I'm not going to go headlong into this because that's quite an intricate question, and I might address it at some point in the future. But one way that a lot of people use tarot in their magical workings is in sympathetic magic. So they use the figures in tarot or the places in tarot to represent people or things that they want to send their energetic intentions towards, or where they want to manifest energy towards. So sympathetic magic is a big way in which I've used tarot in my magical workings in the past. You can also do things like you can use tarot as a doorway to the astral realm. You can use tarot for visualization purposes. If you're trying to instigate a very potent visualization and you're using that as part of your magical working, it's a really good idea to use tarot for that, because tarot is such an incredible picture book. It's so potent. You can really imagine just walking into that tarot card, and whatever that tarot card symbolises for you, whatever power it can symbolise for you, or whatever it represents for you, you can use that in your magical working, and you can really, really bolster that into what you're doing, because you've got tarot there already as kind of a marker for what you're doing magically. But yeah, sympathetic magic would be the main way. So for example, if you wanted to select one of the court cards to represent somebody that you were sending healing energy towards, you could select one of the court cards that most represents the characteristics of that person, and then you could use other tarot cards to represent the kind of healing that you're putting towards that person. So that would be one of the most intrinsic ways I would suggest that tarot can be used. Question 9. How do you store your cards? Okay, the boxes that come with tarot cards are obviously not indestructible. They don't last forever, and a lot of them are really quite flimsy. I don't enjoy kind of hard ceremonial boxes and stuff. I would suggest if you've got some tarot cards that are used only for ceremonial purposes or only for magic or only for personal use in your own home, then it's really nice to have a lovely carved wooden box to keep them in. But if, like me, you have kind of a one size fits all deck that is sort of very well loved and that you use for pretty much everything, and then I would suggest that it's more advisable to have a bag. I have like a black kind of felt bag with a white pentacle on the front, and I've had that for ages. I bought that at a little witchcraft shop in St Ives in Cornwall, and I've just always used that. So I really enjoy bags for tarot. If you travel around with them, if you've got them on you all the time, then a nice sturdy bag with a ribbon tie at the top I think would be the best. But if it's going to be kind of sedentary, if it's just going to be in your room, on your altar, or in a drawer, and it's just for your own use, then you can enjoy splashing out on a really lovely carved ornate box. And I know a lot of people do keep their more special personal tarot cards in such a box, so that's a good idea too. Question 10. What is the best way to connect with a client's energies long distance? Okay, the best way for me to do it is to have some kind of a dialogue with the client which kind of cuts through all of the excess kind of conversation and really gets down to their focus areas. I like to have some kind of understanding of what it is that's led them to me, what it is that's led them to get a tarot reading, and potentially what it is that's made them an energetic match to me at that point on their journey. And I can really, really find that out and tap into that through what they tell me in their notes, because the notes that they give to me are their chance to really zoom in and place a microscope over what it really is for them that's important about this reading, what it is that they really want to get from it and take from it. And when I read that kind of thing from a client, and I read the way that they write and the specific words that they've chosen, that's when I really start to feel the extent to which they're an energetic match. I don't know why I'm losing my voice. This is a lie, by the way. I would not rather be in bed. I'd always rather talk tarot than be in bed. I mean, it'd be nice if I was in bed and just talking to you at the same time, but, you know, this is as good as I can get at the moment. I've made my bed, so I don't really want to mess it up now. Yeah, so that's how I really get into whether or not I mean how I can customize the reading, what I'm going to do for the spread, what kind of questions need to be asked. I really start to design the spread in my head. I get really excited about it. And then the next step for tuning in energetically is when I'm actually doing the reading. And there are a few things that are really important for this. First of all, make sure you're a clear channel. Make sure you go into the reading calm, centered, and grounded. Definitely, always those things. You might want to select specific crystals that you think feed into the energy or the concerns of the client. You might want to use certain symbolic features in and around the reading. That can really help you tap into the energy. A lot of the time I meditate on the client's name, or I pick a few keywords and I close my eyes and I meditate on those words. Sometimes I will actually just hold my working crystal, it's a hunk of amethyst, and I will actually just ask spirit to give me the most potent messages. And I find that that just opens a nice clear channel for me. And of course, you know, I use tarot as a modality. I'm a spiritual counsellor first and foremost, and I use tarot as one of the tools that help me really to tap into how many good suggestions I can give to a client about their life, the different things I think they should explore, the different angles I feel that they should come from with it, and we go through exercises and so on. So tarot is just one part of what I use, and I really feel that. I don't think tarot itself is the oracle. I think it's about me tuning in, and I think it's about me understanding what I can suggest to a client that would benefit them long term. So, you know, I really feel that what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to make that energetic link just clear, ground, centre, feel that I'm absolutely full of white light and ready to start, and I haven't brought any baggage with me. And sometimes if I've had a really hectic few days and I need to do a reading for a client, I'll mark out sacred space. That's a really good way to get the energy strong for a distance reading. So yeah, just think about their concerns, think about the focus areas, consider the dialogue that you've had with them, and then just close your eyes, ground, centre, make sacred space if you want to, focus on their name if you want to. Believe me, when you turn the cards over, it's going to be incredible how much stuff falls into place. It happens to me all the time, every time, and it just always seems to feel right at that moment. You know, pick your moment and make sure that you're totally dedicated to doing the reading, and that's all you're doing for that time. And if you're dedicated and you show up, then the energy and spirit and synchronicity, that meaningful randomness that life is always offering to us, it will show up too. And you know, you'll just be dancing together. It'll be a marriage of thunder. Okay, so that's all for now, people. If you want more, go over to my Facebook fan page. I'll link it below, because I'm doing one card, one word at the moment, and I'm also doing this thing called the Tarot Study Series, or Tarot Study Book Series. If you go onto my photo albums, you'll find it, and it's basically just some like some bullet points for each card that will really help you to tune into the energies of each card. If you are studying tarot for the first time or recapping, then it will be helpful for you. And I apologise that the last 5 minutes of this video might seem really rambly and confused, but I took my chronic pain medication just before filming, and I can feel that it's really kicking in now, so I might have to have a little nap. Okay, much love, people. Blessed be.